Brianna Welk, and this is my illustrated story. Hello!
Hi!
Friend.
How are you?
Good. I'm happy to be here. Oh my God.
I'm glad you're happy to be here.
I have gifts for you. I grew up in Maslin, and then after I graduated high school, I studied culinary in high school, and I moved to Pittsburgh to go to the Cordon Bleu Culinary School. Eventually moved back to Pittsburgh for a few years before coming back and moving home to take care of my grandpa. The roses are really special, too. Yeah. So my tattoo, I had it commissioned by a friend of mine named Angie, and my favorite artist is Mac Miller. My favorite musical artist is Mac Miller, and the line on the tattoo is from a song of his. It said, "Carrying this weight will break glass knees," and kind of resonated with me because I felt like my entire life I've been carrying, whether it was my mom's trauma or my trauma or just trying to get through the day. I've just been carrying the weight of trying to be the best that I can be while also battling my own stuff and battling my mom's stuff and trying to think about my grandpa. So my grandpa has multiple rose bushes around the house, and one of them is about 9 foot tall.
Oh, wow.
And he babied these rose bushes my entire life, which is why they're actually so important. One of them died off the year that he passed away, and the next year after I kind of worked through my stuff and got sober is when it bloomed again all on its own. So, yeah, roses are kind of special to me. Well, I was kind of like bebopped around for a majority of my childhood. My mom had some addiction issues. She was an alcoholic. She had some mental illness too. So she was kind of in and out of, jail or the system. And so I was either in and out of foster homes or staying with family until my grandpa ultimately, took it over and decided that he wanted to take care of me. The first time I had to go into the foster care system, I was a baby, so I don't remember that time. But the second time I remember being taken out of my house was for a situation where my mom was under the influence. Somebody had called the cops because we were outside, and they were basically like, she can't take care of them. But for whatever reason, she had to go to jail, and so me and my brothers got taken to foster care. I got taken to one house that night, and I remember there was maybe 10 kids there. And then my brothers got taken by their dad back to his house, but I got left to go to another foster home. And that foster home, I want to say I was there for at least 6 to 9 months, if not a year, staying with them. It was not a great experience. My grandma passed in 99, so this was around 2000 that this all happened. Because I remember she passed away probably right as I got out of foster care. Because I remember that was another thing. They yelled at me when I was in foster care because I was crying and praying for my grandma to get better, and they said that it wasn't going to do anything, and I just needed to stop. I mean, I was depressed when I was a young age, like from the time I was a young kid. I think I started self-harming when I was 12. And so at the time, when you're a kid, you don't think like, oh, I have mental illness. Like, because we didn't talk about it. We have a theory that my dad is my brother's dad because I look just like him, but he just doesn't want to claim me, which is not a loss because he's a drunk too. So I'm not mad about it. My dad was my grandpa. He raised me, he gave me everything I have, and I'm happy with that. I had the best dad I could have asked for. He was a character. But my grandpa was also super strict. Very much mirrored the generation that he was brought up in. Wasn't affectionate, did not know how to show affection because his dad didn't do it for him. His mom didn't really do it for him. And when he had kids, he was always at the fire station. So he also did not get that opportunity to figure that out with them. So here I was, But all things being said, he had a hard time knowing how to raise a kid because his wife raised his. He was never home. So this was all new to him. And I think we had our problems and we would fight like cats and dogs. Like, we would go at it. And I had no filter and he had no filter. So we would just scream at each other. Even though he didn't say like he loved me very often, he showed it in other ways. Like, I wanted to be on the boys' baseball team because I didn't want to play with the girls, you know, because I was a little tomboy. And that wasn't a thing, but he fought for it and he made it so that I could. And he was so tickled that I was the only girl playing baseball. And this is like my most prized photo that I will never get rid of, ever. It's the only picture I have of all three of us. We were at a class reunion for my grandpa. Like, he had like a 60-some year class reunion or something. And he always wanted to drag me and my mom along. And what I didn't know at the time was that he wanted to drag us along because he wanted to show us off. Like, oh, here's my two lovely daughter and granddaughter, you know. And he was so cheesy because he would walk around and try to drag us around to meet his friends from high school. He drank when he was younger, and then when he realized that my mom drank when she was like 12 and was stealing the booze, he just didn't drink anymore. Then when he was in his 60s, he got lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 4. And he went through chemo and lost all of his hair and smoked cigars every day and beat it. And he bragged about it the whole time, that he could still smoke and beat cancer like a turd. When he finally passed, it was a shock to all of us because it just like that. He had fallen down the stairs in the basement and I found him after he was down there for like an hour and a half. Turns out he fell. He had a stroke, which is why he fell. He broke his hip because our basement is concrete. And he army crawled to a door and he sat there. And he didn't try to call for me or anything because he wanted to die in his own house. Because he's stubborn and he didn't want to die in a hospital. So from that point, I called the ambulance and he yelled at me for calling an ambulance because he said he was fine. But I knew he had had a stroke because his speech was a little slurred. He was coherent enough to where they wheeled him into the room and he asked, he was like, was somebody going to tell me what's going on? And I wouldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him, you know. My wife had to tell him. And she said, Terry, you broke your hip, you had a stroke, you're septic. That's where you're at. And I guess he had like one tear roll down his face and he just said, okay. And within 12 hours, he was gone. So we think he made his own way, his own exit. We think once we told him what was going on, he just, I'm out, you know. When the doctor said that he was septic, they were like, he doesn't get septic from like cracking a hip. He's been septic for a long time. And he's had blood poisoning. So I think he knew he was that sick and he just didn't say anything. For me, probably. Because once I got home, he had the house deed laid out, all the bills, all the phone numbers for the bills to get everything switched over. I found out I owned the house. He had already put it in my name. Yeah. So that being laid out on a table, you're going to tell me that he didn't know? He knew. He was like, I'm going to head out. It's been good. Yeah, I think the best and most rewarding thing that I ever did, looking at my past and our past, I guess, me and her, was, you know, taking the initiative and getting the opportunity to tell her in person that I forgave her. She was the funniest person I knew. She told me about, like, where she started when she was a kid. And, you know, she just never had that self-worth. She never felt worth it. So she was depressed too. But she didn't talk about it because back in the 70s, you didn't talk about it. Like, she was allowing herself to get beat when she was 14 by ex-boyfriends. And that just continued forever till she got married, even. You know, her ex-husband dropped her off on my grandpa's doorstep after busting her teeth out and just threw her there. It just never stopped, you know? And I think it took me a long time to like think about her as a young person. What did she go through, you know, to make her that way? What was she battling? Nobody really asked her, you know, what are you working through? They just basically like, she's an addict. She likes to drink. And that was it. And it was complicated for her, especially because when she was sober, she was super charismatic and funny and loving, like super loving. Didn't get that cold shoulder that everybody else in the family got, you know. She almost like would suffocate you with kisses and hugs, you know. And looking back, I hated it. You know, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, get off of me. She was like an honest person. She would never lie. That's one of those things she wouldn't do. She wouldn't cheat. She wouldn't steal. Those are like her three. Like, I'll never do that, you know. And she really never did. She would definitely never steal. Oh yeah, I mean, I know her whole track record. It wasn't something that was like kept from me, right? Because I was at an age from like 12 on where I could definitely understand this stuff. And even before that, my grandpa wanted to like give me the hard truth of it all, right? And a lot of it was like she got multiple DUIs or drunken disorderlies from sitting in a park and drinking in the car when the car was off. When she was homeless, she got arrested for being homeless. Prostitution at one point because she needed to get money for whatever. But nothing crazy. Like she didn't rob a bank or a store or something like that. No assault charges, no check fraud, just wrong place, wrong time, got caught. And, you know, she hung out with the wrong people. And, you know, she was raped twice. Once at gunpoint, once with a broken bottle to her throat in the middle of Canton. She was thrown off the second story of a building and broke her back by a guy. She had one of the hardest lives I've ever seen. She should have written a book, but she just didn't want to talk about it. It was really hard for her. That's why I thought it was like super important to tell her like, hey, I forgive you, you know? And I don't even remember what gave me the realization, but I just remember that I felt like I had to do it. And so I was doing dishes and she was standing behind me making dinner and I turned around. We weren't even really talking about anything. And I turned around and I said, I just want you to know that I forgive you. And she just started crying. And when she bursted down crying and hugged me, when she was hugging me, she said, I'm so sorry that I'm a drunk and I never meant to be this way. And I was like, I know, Mom. It's okay. I love you no matter what. And it did mean a lot to her. It was obvious that that was like a breath of fresh air of like...
Actually, so tell me about the last time you saw her.
Oh, Lord. I was in college. And I came home and I walked in and my grandpa was basically like, she relapsed again and you need to get her out of here. And he had been dealing with this for years. I mean, she was 48 at the time. This is most of her life he's been dealing with this. So he was like, I can't do it. He's in his 70s. I can't do it. I just remember sitting there, just defeated. So at that point, I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to take her to Canton or take her to the bus station so that she can go to Canton because that's where she would always go. That's where her friends were, you know? And so I got her in the car. We drove down to the bus station in Massillon, downtown. And I think I was pretty much like given her the lecture the whole way down, right? And my mom at this point had a trach in her throat because she had previously burned out her apartment for being blackout drunk. It's a miracle she didn't die, but she couldn't talk very well with the trach in her throat. And she had it for a few years. So she was silent a lot, but I could read her lips. I got really good at that. And when we got there, I just looked at her and I said, "Promise me you'll try harder." And she just said, "I don't make promises I can't keep." I told her I loved her and that I was sorry. That was that. 2 weeks later, she was dead. This is the last card that I ever got from my mom before she died. It's what it says that makes it my most prized possession. That's why it's framed, and I think if my house was on fire, this is the one thing I would grab. What she wrote herself, and she was always a card writer, like she would write paragraphs. She said, "As far as life goes, look ahead and set goals and go about achieving them in confidence in yourself. If you take a knock, get back up and try again. You've turned out to be really great in spite of the chaotic life you've had, and I want to thank you for being a support in me in hopes that someday you can have a sober mother. I love you for that. To the most wonderful, beautiful daughter in the world, I support you in everything you do and choose to do as long as it makes you happy. Love, Mom." They're so little, you're right. They're so perfect. Holy shit. This is great. You did that. It's perfect. It's finally for me, yeah. I mean, it's a reminder, of all the people I've lost and all the people that didn't make it through their depression and their trauma and carrying all the weight that held them down, I don't have to do the same thing. I'm okay. I'm gonna be okay. I just have to keep pushing through it, and it's okay to remember those things occasionally. But if you get stuck in that place, that's the problem. There's beauty in trauma too, and I think that's why the flowers were really important to me, They don't always have to be skeletons. We can move forward and let things bloom out of the dirt that you came from. That's just my thought.
Hey Bree, thank you so much for allowing me to do your piece and trusting me with your skin to translate this very important message for you. And I hope that it continues to help you heal in a way that will end that generational trauma that we spoke about. And I'm just happy to be here with you in this journey, and talking about it that day really did help solidify to me what generational trauma is and what it can do and how to stop it, and I appreciate you.
I had that timeline and that idea of how things should go, and when things weren't happening that way, that's you kind of look at yourself. What am I doing wrong? What can I do better? So there was just it's kind of wild, just the different versions of yourself that you tend to explore to see which person is going to make this work. So you go through all these different variations of yourself, and it got to the point where I was so dedicated to the relationship that I was losing myself along the way a little bit. I didn't know which version of myself was who I really was.